Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraya Satchit Sukhaswarupaya Swami Atmashraddhananda. My respectful pranams to Revered Swami Atmashraddhananda Maharaj and Satyalokanji Maharaj and to other monastic brothers, my greetings. And greetings to everyone who is present here. It's a very historic occasion. Year after year, we celebrate, we try to relive that great occasion which happened, if you take today as the day of consideration, nearly 130 years back. In 1893, on 11th September. Of course, the 11th September got associated with something not much spoken of. 9/11 we know, from 20 years back or so, we know what it meant, how it changed the course of contemporary history. But the real 9/11 is when Swami Vivekananda came to the West and spoke at the Parliament of Religions. Even before we go into what he spoke and how it is deeply relevant for us in the contemporary world, I shall briefly dwell upon how he went there. This will help us to put things in perspective. You know, as the Revered Maharaj mentioned, when he went there, he was 29 years old. If we further go back, when did this process of going there begin? You read his biography, you read the details of how he came to Sri Ramakrishna, how over the years he not only interacted with Sri Ramakrishna, he undertook intense spiritual practices. And after the passing away of his master, he went around the land of India, mainly on foot, for over 5 or 6 years. And how, when Swamiji was wanting to meditate, many of you may not know that he was the one who always wanted to meditate. He always wanted to close his eyes and sit in meditation. But there was some power, some divine push, which he used to call as Divine Mother's work. And he would not be able to meditate. It's not that he is not able to meditate in our sense of the term, and because our mind is restless and we close our eyes only to see if, how much time has passed, 10 minutes or 15 minutes. It's the other way. His mind is always wanting to deeply go into that infinite. But somehow, as one of the senior monks used to say, he used to drag his mind out into doing his mother's work. You know, initially he did not even want to do this. Sri Ramakrishna one day said that Naren, that is young Vivekananda, as he was known, he will teach the world. He said, no, I will not teach the world. Then Sri Ramakrishna said, your very bones will do it. Which means you are born to do that. You will have to do that. And then when he, after the passing away of his master, inspired by some divine purpose, divine inspiration, he went from place to place, beginning with Kolkata, into Kashi, or further into Himalayas, or the deserts of Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Gujarat, various parts of South India, interacting with all kinds of people, observing them very closely, observing the spiritual life of the people and also the way people were living. how there was so much of economic persecution, social persecution. Despite having such rich spiritual heritage, why there was all this contrast that he was seeing. So he was deeply pained. And finally, the transformational moment came when Swamiji reached Kanyakumari. As you know, Kanyakumari is the place where the three seas meet, the last tip of India. And then after visiting Mother Kanyakumari's temple, he spotted that big rock inside the sea, Sripadapara, as it is called in Tamil. And he swam across, which was again something very historic. This happened in 1892, and there, as if deeply pained, at the same time wanting to find a solution, not just dwelling upon pain, not just being complaining, but trying to be part of the solution. He went to that rock and meditated for 3 days in December, in the end of December 1892. It was there that he actually had his meditation. Some meditation of a different type. We generally meditate on God, we visualize the form of God and try to focus our mind on that. But he meditated on that ancient and what we call as the tradition of India, or the state of India, and how this was so important that this message of India should be broadcast to the world, and how to raise India, both the things. So after those 3 days of very intense and deep meditation, Swamiji finally decided that he'll go to the West. He had heard about the Parliament of Religions being held in Chicago. This possibly, as per our researchers, possibly he had heard of it when he was in Gujarat. And again, when he came to Tamil Nadu, 2 times he had heard of that. In Rameshwaram, we met the Raja of Ramnad. There also the Raja actually originally thought of going to the Parliament of Religions. But when he saw Swamiji's extraordinary personality and his scholarship and his eloquence and his insight and his spirituality, he said there could be no one better than him. Then we know the story of how he came to, Swamiji came from that rock, he went to today's Chennai, and finally, after a lot of things like his disciple Asanga Perumal collecting funds for Swamiji, not agreeing first, and then again second time, the funds were collected, the Raja of Khetri's request, visit to Khetri in Rajasthan. And finally on 31st of May, he got into the ship to America. This again, before he went to America, he passed through various places, including Singapore. So that Singapore is blessed, because Swamiji has come here. Swamiji has blessed both Malaysia and Singapore. His sacred feet have come on this land. And then, during this trip, again we know that he was a deep thinker. He met Jamshedji Tata, and during the conversation, Swamiji mentioned about need to start research institutes, scientific research institutes in India. There were none in those days. Today there are many, in those days there were none. And later on, Jamshedji started what is now called Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore. Of course, it was started when both Swamiji and Jamshedji were no longer alive. There's a long story, there's a long history of how it finally came in, but it owes its origin to that conversation which Swamiji had with Jamshedji Tata, who later wrote a letter to Swamiji, which is part of the archives. It's also found in Swami Atmasraddhananda's biography. How he said that Swamiji, please recall our visit, our meeting and conversation. So all that happened when he was going to Chicago. As if his work had started right from there itself. And then he goes to Vancouver and finally Chicago. And now there are now 130 years have passed, things have changed. But in those days, hardly anybody traveled to America. Particularly a monk, a Hindu monk going there was that the first time. No one had ever gone, because there was this feeling that if somebody crossed the ocean, he would be losing his caste. He will be going across the Kalapani. So Swamiji also had hesitation because the social structure was such. So he had asked permission from Holy Mother Sri Sharada Devi. And when he was in Chennai, he was in the house of a devotee which is very close to our Chennai ashram. And when the letter went to Mother and Mother said, yes, please go, Sri Ramakrishna's blessings are with you, he is with you. It is said that he took that letter and like a child, he burst into a kind of a small nritya. Oh, Mother has given permission. And when he went to the West and he arrived at Chicago, actually the Chicago event again was part of a bigger event. It was not that just Parliament was organized. It was a big exposition which was held to mark the discovery of America by Columbus. It was 400 years of discovery of finding America by Columbus. So it was called World's Columbian Exposition. And it was one of the biggest expositions ever held in the history of mankind. Almost a whole new city in Chicago, in today's term we might say, a big colony was made to accommodate that exposition. And Swamiji, unused to the ways of America, he was a wandering monk. He did not know how to handle money, how to go to a hotel. He was just a monk from India. He was wearing this ochre robe, which many people did not know that this is what a monk should wear. And there were difficulties. There were some people who pulled at his cloth saying, why do you wear like that? And there were also occasions when some people ran after him. He says, I was howled at and sometimes some small stones were also thrown, saying that, why are you the way you are? Because they had never seen a monk from India. So with all those difficulties, Swamiji stayed in Chicago for some time. He visited the exposition for 10 days and he saw the Western advancement in science, in technology, in sociology, in architecture, because that was the purpose of that exposition. To present before the world what all America had achieved in the last 400 years. We saw generators for the first time, electric generators. There was no electricity in those days to Kanpur. He also saw many other things which were new in those days. Now they are very common. But then his money was running short, and unlike now today, we go somewhere, we check on the net what is the temperature there, what is the way people live there, etc. There was no internet. So he never knew it was a cold place. And the devotees there from Chennai also did not know that it will be cold there. Nobody had given him that warm clothing there to see. And how much of a struggle. Finally, I'm not going into the whole story. This is one of the very immortal stories. In the history of mankind, there are some stories which become immortal. If you take the traditional mythological stories, they're not mythological in the terms of myth, but yes, we call them mythological. Like the story of Rama or the story of Krishna. They are very immortal stories. Rama going to exile, Sri Krishna playing in Vrindavan. Or you take the Jesus story, or anybody else, the great Buddha leaving his home. These are all stories, these are very immortal stories. They leave a very deep impression on mankind, on our human way of looking at things. The Swamiji's life is coming, whole life is like a story, but this particular part, how he went to Chicago after being someplace where when somebody asked him, the famous professor of Greek from Harvard University asked him, Swamiji, why you are here? And he said, I have to speak in the Parliament of Religions, but I don't have any note of introduction. And then he said, to ask you, Swami, your right to speak is like asking the sun its right to shine. That's how Swamiji got the first kind of praise. And then he wrote a letter that the gentleman, Professor Wright, his name was, he wrote a letter that fared to the committee which was organizing this. That here is a man who is more learned than all our professors and learned people in America put together. And that's how with that letter Swamiji came. Again, as I said, he was a monk from India, unused to the ways of the West. He somewhere dropped the address to where he had to go, he had to move around. Finally, one kind lady organized things and he reached the Parliament of Religions just on time. And as just now we heard that he was not first very prepared. Even great Swami Vivekananda had some kind of stage fear. And he stood there whether I should speak or not. Because before him was the cream of America. 3,000 or 4,000 people. And such huge gathering, and they're all very learned people, very cultured people. So he was first not very confident what he should speak. But then surely there was some divine inspiration, some divine power which spoke to him. You know, one great thinker, leader has said that when Swami Vivekananda spoke at the Parliament of Religions, the first opening talk that he gave or lecture that he gave, it signified something very great. What was that? As a tradition, as a race, the Indian or India had been under subjugation for a very long time. People were made to believe that they are nothing. But here was somebody who had gone from a similar circumstance as anybody else, but still stood there and spoke with such pride. In one of his lectures, he said, I am one of the proudest men ever born. Not proud because of generally we become proud of our something. We have beauty, we have learning, we have money or something. None of that. But of my culture. Because of my spiritual culture. That I come from that country which has spoken of that vastness, that inclusiveness. And Swamiji's that lecture, we just now read that first opening talk. Just to make that reading a little more lasting in its impression on our mind, I'll just refer to 2 or 3 points from that reading. Swamiji said, I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks in the world. This is such a historic fact that as far as monasticism is concerned, the tradition of monasticism, we are aware of the monastic tradition in Buddhism, in Christianity, in Hinduism. It all started with what we call as the sannyas ashrama of Vedas. It is the Vedas that we find the first monastic order being mentioned. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad there is a mention that as soon as a person gets a feeling that this world is not going to give me eternal happiness, whichever be his state of mind, state of, let's say, he is in family, he is having some responsibility, but if he is genuine, he can take that life of monasticism. It means, of course, preparation. It means that he is truly genuine about it. It's not some passing emotion. So here in the Vedas it said that there have been sannyasins. So Swami said, I am greeting you in the name of the most ancient order of the monks. So this was the first kind of information in his welcome address Swamiji has given to the world. And I am not just a monk, I belong to the most ancient order of monks. Another thing Swamiji speaks of, that idea of toleration, acceptance. Again, as you know, Swamiji spoke at the Parliament and then he went back in 1897. When he came to India, he was given a royal welcome. First, he was a little afraid how people in India are going to receive him. Because getting away, an idea of crossing the ocean, idea of whether he'll be accepted back. But once he was traveling in that ship, he writes to somebody, he says, no, India must accept me. India must accept my message. And it was really so. It was so prophetic. When Swamiji landed, first he came to Sri Lanka, he was given a royal welcome, and then passing through some places and finally reached Rameshwaram. There he was given a very royal welcome. The Raja of Ramnad himself came and pulled the horse chariot in which Swamiji was traveling. In fact, anyone of you who visit Rameshwaram can go to a place in the Rameshwaram island itself, a corner of that. It is known as where he kept his foot. So that then there is a temple of Swamiji now there in that place, near the Rameshwaram temple. In Rameshwaram temple itself, he was given the welcome, which is now inscribed on stone now. So when he came back, and he gave series of lectures beginning from there till he reached Almora. There were around more than 25 lectures. It is known as Indian lectures. There, a number of places Swamiji had mentioned this idea of toleration. He said, in the Vedic evolution of our ideas, a very historic moment took place when the great rishis uttered this sentence, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. Ekam Sat, the truth is one. Vipra, the learned people. Bahudha Vadanti. They can call the truth in different ways. You know, in Hindi, there is a great poet, saint, Kabir Das. He used to say, Maida ek, pakwan anek. Maida is only one, you can make different pakwans, different dishes out of it. Similarly, the same truth can be called by different names. Ramakrishna, Swamiji's great master, himself had put it across in so many ways. He said, there is a pond, and in that there is water. But suppose there are 4 ghats to reach to that pond. Somebody goes from one side, he says it is water. Another person, he speaks a different language, he says it is pani. Somebody says it is aqua. Somebody says jal, in Bengali it is jal. So different our backgrounds and languages, we speak of the same truth in different ways. And Swami Vivekananda said that this idea that the same truth can be spoken of, can be described in various ways, such a historic turn of events in the evolution of the Vedas. Of course, we generally say Vedas did not, there was no evolution. They were just given by their whole share. They were given by the Lord. They are not made by a human being. It is the very breadth of the divine. But if you see from the very structure of the Vedic literature or Vedas that we have, there are different parts of that. There is Brahmana, there is Samhita, there is Aranyaka, there are Upanishads. And you find all these are meant for different stages of our life. We have people who want to fulfill their desires. So the Vedas prescribe a lot of yajnas for them. You do this puja, you do this. Nowadays only pujas are remaining, not so much of yajnas. You read the Ramayana, when Dasharatha wanted the son, he did putra kamishti yajna. So like that yajnas were spoken of for fulfillment of desires. Then it was said further as man evolved, he was not just satisfied with fulfillment of desires. He wanted to worship God for something more deeper. So then upasanas came up. Then person started thinking of the same God, not using external rituals, but internal visualizations. He thinks of God as if sitting within him. In one of the Samaveda texts, it is given that you meditate on God as morning, rising sun. The rising sun is full of gentleness, full of light, freshness. To meditate on God. So like that, different things. And finally, when we hear this statement, it is not from the Upanishads, but it is one of the important statements from the Veda. That is, Ekam Sat Vipra. The same thing Swamiji has spoken of when he was speaking at the opening Parliament of Britain's address. Again, Swamiji mentions in the Gita He says, whosoever comes to me, through whatsoever form I reach him, all men are struggling through paths till the end lead to me. Mamavatman vartante manushya partha sarvashaha, the Gita comes. So all those are different ways. Like we are sitting in this hall, it could have 4 doors. One could be facing north, another south, another east. All the doors finally lead to the hall inside. Same way, if we are sincere. It does not mean that a person will, just because he has taken up a religion, it definitely means that he is going to reach God. What does he want through that religion that matters? If he wants to only look at only social side of his religion, which means he has only how many people are following, how many number is there, he will be busy with that. But somebody is not wanting that. He wants to go a little ahead of that. Even that has its own value. But he wants to go further. He perhaps thinks of religion as one which that I worship God for removal of my wants. In the Bhagavad Gita, you find 4 types of devotees mentioned. There are people who are in trouble or crisis. That's one type. There are people who wish something from God. That's another type. Most of the devotees are from these 2 types. Third type, when you worship God, why? Because you are curious. You want to know what is that divine being. You meditate on that. You pray to Him. So please reveal your nature to me, O Lord. Who is that Creator who has made this world? The famous Nasadiya Sutta of Rigveda also comes to mind. That what is that from what it was before this creation came into being? What it was before that? Swami Vivekananda described as that it is like layers and layers of darkness it was before that. Then from there it all started, all these questions come to us. And then again finally those who worship God, because they have understood that God alone is fit object of worship. To Him alone I should offer all my energies, all my attention, all myself, everything. They are known as Jnanis. Artha, Artharthi, Jigyasu and Jnani. 4 types of devotees are mentioned. So when a person, whichever pathway he takes up, finally, if he is a Jigyasu, which means he is a keen seeker of God, whichever path he takes up, God will help him. He will show him, look, this is what I am. But if he is using God only as a means to fulfill his desire, Krishna does not say it is wrong. He does not say that if a person worships God with desires, he is not a devotee, he is also a devotee. But he is at a stage which Ramakrishna would say, suppose you go to the king. The king is all powerful. He has opulence, he has authority, he can do many things. So you go to him with all humility and say, "Oh king, can you give me 5 kgs of bananas?" What is it? The king can give something much bigger. Similarly, when we ask anything of the world, it's just like asking God, all that tremendous power called God, that only give me small thing. But this is a kind of a mistake in that sense, the spiritual sense. But as you go further, you say, no, I want nothing of this world. I want you and you alone. Such a person, such a seeker, is called a real worshipper or real one who is approaching towards God. So these few things from this lecture which is so historic, as Maharaj was mentioning, in 1993, 30 years back, this was celebrated, the centenary of this lecture was celebrated. I don't know whether there is any other lecture whose centenary was ever celebrated. But now it's 130 years. Maybe we will not live to see its second centenary, but we are fortunate that we are reading it again. But Swami was not just giving that lecture, which was very important. He gave actually 5 lectures, major lectures, in the Parliament of Kings. There's one story which I would like to quote today's context. It's very relevant. It is a famous story. Some of you definitely have read directly from Swamiji's lecture or have known it otherwise. It is the frog in the well story. Swamiji says, I have just spoken, and that was the second lecture, where he said, why we disagree. He says, just the previous speaker had spoken, why we disagree, and he had expressed his sadness over it. Let me tell you why we disagree. Then he narrates the stories. It's known in Sanskrit as Kupamundaka Katha. Kupamundaka means the story of the frog in the well. That there lived a frog in the well. He was born there, he grew up there, and there was nothing else, so he was in the well only. He had not seen the world beyond the well. One day, Swamiji of course puts it very humorously, one day another one frog in search of some fly, it fell into this well. And when he fell, this was the only frog was present there, then they kind of debated. The frog in the well asked him, from where have you come? He said, come from the sea. The sea? What is sea? He said, sea is very big, it's a huge water. Then he wanted to give him an idea how big it is. So the frog in the well jumped from one corner to another. He said, the sea as big as this? He said, how can sea is very big. Then he took a little bigger leap and said, all right, is it as big as this? He said, how can you compare your little well with sea? But the frog in the well was completely convinced that his well is the best well and the biggest well. He said, no, there can be nothing bigger than my well. You are a liar, there is nothing called sea, get out from there. So Swami says, each one of these various religious traditions that we know, they all sit in their own little well. They're thinking that my well is the biggest well. But as we grow, as we make evolution, we begin to see that man is actually, all are searching for that infinite reality in their own way, in their own understanding. Swamiji also gave, during the course of his various talks, what is known as a paper on Hinduism. It's a small writing. We do not know if the original paper is still there. We do not know if those things are preserved. But yes, it is called a paper on Hinduism, which means it might have been written. In that, Swamiji gives basic ideas, basic concepts on which Hinduism is based. In that, one idea I would definitely like to refer to, because that is the one idea which Swamiji later on taught after the Parliament of Religion was over, and he went to more than 100 places in America. First he took the help of a lecture bureau called Slayton Lecture Bureau, which was the day when, today's kind of a event managers. So they will organize. Swamiji went to different places for 2 years, but later he discovered that that was not the right thing, and he discontinued the contract which he had done with them. And then he started speaking independently, but more than 100 places. And what did he teach in those 100? This was the idea from paper on Hinduism. So that idea was the divinity of soul. That man is essentially divine. Somebody calls it, puts it in beautiful English. He says, children of immortal bliss. Yes, the Hindu refuses to call you a sinner. It's a standing libel on human nature to call a man sinner. This was actually such a poetic translation of what comes to the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. I would like to refer to the original, when Swamiji's translation, remarkable translation we just heard. Shunvantu Vishwe Amritasya Putra Aye Dhaman Vishwani Dastu Vedahametam Purusham Mahantam Adityavarna Tamasah Parasta Tameva Viditvati Mrityumeti Nanya Pantha Vidyate Ayanaya Shunvantu Vishwe Amritasya Putra. Hear ye children of immortal bliss. He doesn't call people as sinners or people who have always thought ill of themselves. Oh, we have done mistake, we have done something which is not right, No, don't have to always bring yourself down. Remember your divine nature. This is the idea which is actually taught in Vedanta. When Swami Vivekananda spoke in Parliament of Religions, he introduced Vedanta to the world. Vedanta's journey with the world had already started before Swamiji came. Almost 200 years now back, if you go, there were some Americans like Transcendentalists were there, like Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson and others, who had already got some inkling. They have read Bhagavad Gita, some of them read Vishnu Purana. But actual true Vedantic ideas coming from the mouth of a very authentic person, that was the first time when he spoke at the Parliament of Religions. Some people just don't understand that when Swamiji said that we are all divine. But slowly it began to sink. And now, a couple of years back, there was an article in one of the magazines which says, in American magazines, that many people think we now believe in Vedanta, although we continue to be in whatever religious tradition we are. We believe in the basic tenets of Vedanta. What is that? That each one is divine and people can approach that divinity through various paths. There is not only one path, there are various paths to reach that divinity. So Swamiji introduced this, says children of immortal bliss. Now if you go into it, what does it mean? If we look at ourselves, we all of us have read a bit of Bhagavad Gita, we have heard maybe a few verses from some Upanishads we have heard. To go deeper, to take these things together, in today's world when we have our own lot of tensions and depression and negative thinking and people thinking to self-harm themselves, we all find that it is because we have forgotten our real nature. Vedanta speaks of our real nature. Now, people may say, oh, real nature, well, my nature is good, I am very sweet. Somebody else's nature is not good, he is very harsh, very rude. That is true. There are differences in human expressions. Somebody is very restless, somebody is very lazy, and somebody is very sweet. He has a very good demeanor. But behind all these various types of expressions of our being, there is still something deeper. Which means we are not just to stop at our psychological self. You know the psychological self. We go further down into our spiritual self. What is our spiritual self? We have the physical self, we have the intellectual self, and we have the psychological self. Even further than that, there is the spiritual self. And this is what Swamiji emphasized on. He says, let us remember that. What is our spiritual self? Spiritual self, he, again in the paper on Hinduism, he describes that as Atman. The word Atman. He says, what is the definition of Atman? He says, that which cannot be killed, which cannot be destroyed, which cannot be diminished, which cannot be cut through by a sword. It is immortal. In each one of us, that divinity, that immortality, that infinite source of strength, that infinite source of future possibilities is present. This is what Swamiji in his various teachings later on has spoken of. He spoke of, he gave a series of lectures on Karma Yoga or on Jnana Yoga or Raja Yoga. There are different ways of expressing the same goal, and the goal is to manifest divinity that is within all. Swamiji, of course, in those few days, almost 15 to 20 days when he was speaking at the Parliament, he became an intensely popular speaker. So much so that there are records that when on some day they found that people are leaving the hall because the speakers were not very connectable, not very interesting. So the organizers will get up and say, today Swami Vivekananda will speak. And many will sit back. Yes, today we'll hear him again. There's some magnetism about him. And that worked. Even though a few words, it worked not only on that audience, It brought a new vigor to the idea of India, the idea of spirituality. There were, in the newspapers it came that here is a person who is so learned. We thought that nation was a very backward nation, ignorant people very superstitious. But then such people like Swami Vivekananda exist. How can that nation be so bad? In fact, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru has spoken about it. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose has spoken about it. Various of the modern thinkers have spoken about the way Swamiji impacted the Parliament of Religions. So that was like the opening ceremony. For now, if you go to the West, as we understand, there are several religious denominations, several spiritual teachers are working. There are numerous temples across the Western world, numerous yoga, now the word yoga day is there. All that you will find somewhere finding its root beginning with that Parliament of Religion, because that is where Swamiji came and introduced. Somebody made an interesting observation recently. That's again worth mentioning. He says recently the Indian team of scientists were successful, and Chandrayaan went. It landed on the moon. So if you go back, it starts with Swami Vivekananda's conversation with Jamshedji Tata, which led to the starting of the scientific research in India, and finally founding of ISRO. So that was such a historic event. Now, coming to the idea of harmony that we find being taught, I would like to close by reading from the last address of Swami Vivekananda. It's called Address at the Final Session. The first session was on 11 September 1893. The final session was on 27 September 1893. Last 2 or 3 paragraphs. They are remarkable in conveying the message which Swamiji gave earlier, in the earlier sessions, beginning with his opening speech. Swamiji says that, I shall have the privilege of reading it. He says, much has been said of the common ground of religious unity. I am not going just now to venture my theory, but if anyone here hopes that this unity will come by the triumph of any one of the religions and the destruction of the others, to him I say, brother, yours is an impossible hope. Do I wish that the Christian would become Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that the Hindu or Buddhist become Christian? God forbid. The seed is put in the ground, and earth and air and water are placed around it. Does the seed become the earth, or the air, or the water? No, it becomes a plant. It develops after the law of its own growth, assimilates the air, the earth, and the water, converts them into plant substance, and grows into a plant. Similar is the case with religion. The Christian is not to become a Hindu or a Buddhist, nor a Hindu or a Buddhist to become a Christian, but each must assimilate the spirit of the others, and yet preserve his own individuality and grow according to his own law of growth. There's a remarkable insight that you take, you try to understand how people from different circumstances, environments, beginnings, they have tried to approach that unnameable reality, unknown, invisible reality called God, and try to picturize, understand in their own mind, in their own understanding. You can learn something from their spiritual struggle, but you must follow your own law of individuality and grow according to your own law of growth. And finally he says, if the Parliament of Religions has shown anything to the world, it is this. It has proved the world that holiness, purity and charity are not the exclusive positions of any church in the world, and that every system has produced men and women of the most exalted character. In the face of this evidence, if anybody dreams of the exclusive survival of his own religion and the destruction of the others, I pity him from the bottom of my heart and point to him that upon the banner of every religion will soon be written, in spite of resistance, help and not fight, assimilation and not destruction, harmony and peace and not dissension. With this message, Swamiji concluded his message at the Parliament of Religions. We are very fortunate, we are indeed blessed that we have read this, we have tried to understand this on this very historic day. I'm thankful that all of you have listened to it, and thanks to Vivekananda Maharaj for inviting me. Thank you.